Hello and welcome to Realms Edge Gaming. So, in this episode, what I thought we were going to do is we're going to have a look at the Citadel colour range. And the question we're going to answer is, where do Citadel paints get their names from? When you're starting off and when you've been doing the hobby for a while, some of the names of the paints can be a little confusing and you might wonder where the names came from. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the range, starting with the shade paints. And then what I might do is I might look at the base and some of the others as well. And we'll go through the range and we'll try and learn a little bit about the names. So let's start off with our shades. In total, there are 16 pots of shade colour or ink, I suppose. And it looks like there are some that are repeated because they've got gloss and normal. So we'll have a look at those as well, and we'll start off with our first one, which is Agrax Earthshade. This one also comes in a gloss, and it got its name from the 40k universe. So it's Agrax is an Imperium world, and basically they had a discovery of the Standard Template Construct, or STC, and this was for a substance which was called 145XX22, which was made here. The substance was a paint and it had a unique chemical composition which allowed for the painting of war gear to be completed in a much shorter time. However, the discovery of the STC caused rebellion on several hive worlds that were responsible for painting vehicles, and it actually forced the Imperium to enact a full compliance action upon the citizens of the pigment wells of Agrax. Due to this, the STC was suspected of being somehow corrupted by chaos. We'll move on to our next shade, which is going to be Athonian Camoshade. And they got their name from the Athonian tunnel rats, who are a militarum regimentum of the Astra Militarum that hails from the world of Athonos. This imperial planet's governance is constantly in flux, as it's vied for by dozens of rival noble families. The resultant gang warfare amongst the various supporters is seemingly unending and always brutal, with the violence often spilling out into the streets and the sewers of the hydroponic gardens that cover much of Athonos. Such is the recruiting ground for the Athonian tunnel rats. And by the time they're drafted for the Imperial Tithe, they're already masters of urban combat amongst the most determined close-quarter fighters of the Imperial Guard. Our next shade is going to be Biel-Tan Green. Biel-Tan is a former Elder craft world which had a penchant for war. But unlike the other craft worlds, who were generally ruled by seer councils, Biel-Tan was led by a council of exarchs, Elder who are trapped on the path of the warrior. This gave them a really narrow view of the world and the galaxy and how to deal with confrontation and diplomacy, really, and their goal was nothing less than a refounding of the ancient Eldar Galactic Empire. And to do this, they decided they needed to purge the galaxy of all their enemies who they saw were wrongfully on planets that they viewed rightfully as their own. Our next colour is Carroburg Crimson, and for this one we're going back to Warhammer Fantasy. So during the world that was, there was the race of men who were part of the Empire. Carroburg was actually a sizable town which specialised in trade, glass and pottery. It was a maze of winding streets, and it was built on a steep slope. So the richer you were, the higher up you were, because whenever it rained, all the kind of mud and sludge slid down towards the bottom. So where the poorer people were and the richer people of Carroburg were at the top. Right, I really struggled with this one. Casandora Yellow, one of the shades. And the only references that I could find of this in both Warhammer kind of Fantasy, Age of Sigmar, and the 40k universe was the magic spell from, the kind of Winds of Magic, which was called Comet of Casandora. And it says, reaching out across the winds of magic into the highest heavens, the wizard draws a wandering meteorite down towards the battlefield. I wasn't sure whether the reference of the yellow was to do with the colour of the comet. They get a mention as well back in the 2017 Stormcast Eternals battle tome on page 46 for the Castellant. it says the Heralds of Casandora, but I couldn't find out who Casandora actually was. I was wondering if anyone's listening and could give any further information. It would be greatly appreciated if you could drop me a comment below and just let me know, because I couldn't find anything further on this colour, if it was in reference to a person or I'm not entirely sure really, but those are the two bits that I could find that linked towards this colour. Moving on, Coelia Greenshade. So the Ghoul Stars were in 40k again. Also known as the Ghost Stars, is a mysterious region of space that is part of the Halo Stars, which is located beyond the furthest reaches of known space, northeast of the Segmentum Ultima beyond the eastern fringe. This vast tract of relatively unexplored wilderness space was once home to a number of human-inhabited worlds. However, some ancient threat is believed to have been responsible for the destruction of these worlds, which accounts for the large number of dead worlds found within the region. And if you look down here, just there, we've got Coelia. I imagine the green shade is due to like the kind of minimal light that you can see. Maybe it's kind of got a greenish glow. Again, if anyone's got any further information on that, that would be fantastic to kind of hear your perspective on it. I'll be honest, I don't really play too much 40k. I normally play Age of Sigmar, so the kind of 40k universe is one that I'm not as familiar with, but hopefully as I kind of get more into it, I'll be able to expand my knowledge of that. Right, this one was an interesting one. A relatively new shade, Cryptek Armourshade Gloss, and it, from what I'm aware of, only comes in a kind of gloss format. It was relatively new. I think it was brought out recently along with the Space Marine and Necron box set. And it's called Cryptek Armourshade Gloss, to do with the Necrons. Crypteks are members of pan-galactic conclaves of technologies whose purpose is to study and maintain the eldritch devices of their race. They are masters of dimensional dissonance, singularity manipulation, atomic transmutation, elemental transmogrification, and countless other reason-defying technologies. So, moving onwards to Drakenhof Nightshade, and we're going back to the Warhammer Fantasy universe, joined the world that was. So, Castle Drakenhof was the former capital of the imperial province of Sylvania, during the reign of its last imperial noble, Count Otto von Drac. Nearly all the rulers of Sylvania, living and undead alike, made the castle their seat of power, and it was actually where Vlad von Carstein began his reign of terror, again back in the world that was, and from which the battlements he summoned his undead army. And you can see here the kind of, I think this was a still from Total War, Warhammer the game. You can see the colour, the kind of the bluish greyish tinge, very reminiscent of the Drakenhof Nightshade. I have to say it's one of my favourite shades, this one, along with the next one which we're going to look at, which is Druchii Violet. So again, you can kind of see the colour similarities. This was back in the world that was. We've got the Dark Elves. Now, we're going to learn a little bit more about this, I think, in Age of Sigmar, because Malekith, who was the ruler of the Dark Elves back in the world that was, seems to be coming across the Age of Sigmar as, you know, Malarian. I did a video recently about the possibility of the Umbraneth, which seems to be his people, which would kind of be a kind of throwback to the Dark Elf race. They were known as the Druchii, as they were known in their own tongue, and this is where we get Druchii Violet. And they were one of the three elven civilizations. We had the Wood Elves, we had the High Elves, and we had the Dark Elves. They made their home in the bleak, chilly lands on the continent of Naggaroth. Our next shade is going to be Fuegan Orange. Fuegan, the Burning Lance, is an Eldari Phoenix Lord, the founder of the Fire Dragons Aspect Warriors. Fuegan is the founder of the Fire Dragon Shrine, teaching the art of death through flame and fire. Like all Phoenix Lords, Fuegan has been reborn many times, giving him thousands of years of experience. Okay. In Warhammer Fantasy, we're looking at Nuln Oil, and this one is also available in gloss. Nuln was the second largest imperial city, and it was actually the largest manufacturer and exporter of munitions and black powder war machines within the entire empire, and it earned itself the title the Armoury of the Empire. Just a map there we've got of the empire, and these were some of the kind of uniforms that the soldiers would wear. Here we go, we've got Reichland Flesh Shade, and this one is also available in gloss. So Reichland, again, another city within the empire, was known originally as the Grand Principality of Reichland, and it was one of the founding electoral provinces of the empire, created during the reign of its first emperor, Sigmar Heldenhammer, who we know a lot about in AOS. Indeed, in the eyes of the imperial citizenry, the territories of the Reichland are considered the heartland of the empire, both culturally, politically, economically, religiously, and pretty much in every other way that matters. Our final shade to round us up to 16 is going to be Seraphim Sepia. Now, to be honest with you, I'm not sure if this is where they kind of got the idea for Seraphim from. I couldn't really see this colour on the models. I don't know whether within 40k there is something else to do with Seraphim. Again, if you could offer me kind of further kind of advice or point me in the direction of some other sources, that would be amazing. But this is kind of what I thought it might be leaning towards, so let's take a look. And it's to do with the Adepta Sororitas army. And it's the models here, the Seraphim, the angelic warriors known as Seraphim, fight in the advanced guard of the army. They're equipped with Sanlior pattern jump packs, and they descend from on high, launching themselves at the enemy lines, using shock and awe to shatter formations before their fellow sisters open fire. Each Seraphim wields a pair of pistols chosen from amongst the holy trinity of weapons, bolt pistols used to spit hails of death as the Seraphim arc through the sky. Hand flamers spew burning torrents to immolate packed ranks of foes, whilst inferno pistols fire focused beams of heat that melt through armour and flesh with contemptuous ease. And that rounds up our 16 Citadel colour shades. Would you like to see maybe having a look at the base colours, some of the dry ones, some of the technical ones, and we can explore the lore behind the paints? If you could drop me a comment below, that would be amazing. Or alternatively, if you could subscribe to the channel too, that would be really helpful as well. I hope you've enjoyed learning about some of the names of the Citadel colours, as much as I've kind of enjoyed researching them. I must admit, I've learned some things too, picking up little bits of lore that I wasn't familiar with. So I've really enjoyed the process, and I hope you've enjoyed listening along too. Speak soon.